Hi, my name is John Speraw. I'm head coach for the U.S. men's national team. We're doing a course today on observations that we've made in the national team gym about collegiate players that arrive and make a transition to the professional game. What are some of the things that you can learn from our experiences that can help you prepare for that now? One of the things that we've observed from athletes that first arrive here is their various strength levels and their ability to handle the volume of training that we demand of them and their professional clubs demand of them. When you're playing in the high school level or club level, you're playing tournaments on the weekends, maybe training a couple times a week. When you make that transition to the collegiate space, now you're training 5-6 days a week and having a couple matches a week for a 3 or 4 month period. So already the transition to the collegiate space is challenging on athletes as the volume builds. But then you get to the international level and it's a whole different deal. You're going to be training 5-6 days a week. You're going to be having 2 or 3 matches a week, and you're going to be doing that for 8 months. We've really observed that athletes that arrive here who are not physically prepared to handle that volume almost need a year off just to strength train to get ready and prepare their bodies for that demand at the professional level. So what does that mean for you? We need to make sure that we are understanding the strength and conditioning, how we prepare ourselves at younger ages, whether or not you're in high school preparing for the collegiate transition, or you're in college right now and you're preparing for that professional transition. How do we get your body ready to handle the demands at the highest levels? And then there's how do you prepare your body from a training perspective? You have strength conditioning, but then in the training room, your prehab, your rehabilitation, what are the things that you need to do for injury prevention? Those aspects also need to have an increased level of individual responsibility. At the high school and certainly at the collegiate levels, you have team trainers. They're very capable. In general, the amount of resources that are put into the collegiate space far outweigh any professional club in Europe or Asia or South America. So you have a ton of support in the training room aspect. When you're going overseas, all of a sudden you're in a position where you need to take care of yourself a little bit better. And you understand in conjunction with strength conditioning how valuable that is in order for you to make sure that you can perform on a day-to-day basis. On the theme of responsibility, the other aspect is how you're developing your own game. When you're in college or high school or you get to the national team, we have long-term views on how we can develop you. We have a thoughtful process that is in your best interest. When you get to the professional space, a lot of times the coaches are only there for a short period of time. A lot of times the deals that you sign to play professionally overseas are only 1 or 2 year deals. Those clubs want results immediately. They're not necessarily thinking about how to develop your game for the long term because they don't really think that you're going to be there. So you need to take charge of your own individual development. The coach may not have the same type of thought process or perspectives that you do or your coaches here at Team USA or your current coaches may have. So you have to take charge of that. You have to have understanding of your own goals, what it is you need to work on with your own game, what's the plan in order for you to execute on those goals. I know even in the collegiate space, we oftentimes encourage players to keep journals. And the national team, I never encouraged guys to keep journals, and yet half the guys have them because they're so into their own development and taking charge of their own process. They are responsible and doing that for themselves. And I think that's essential if you're going to develop yourself over the course of a professional season. The other challenge for athletes as they come into the professional space is that we don't have a pro league here in the United States. So you have to leave to go overseas, whether it's Asia, Europe, South America. Athletes typically leave sometime in August to September on average, and they leave and they're alone. They go overseas in a totally new culture, totally new environment, totally new coaching experience. We've already talked about the training room and the strength conditioning. All those things are vastly different cultures. How do you handle that? That's really a challenge for some athletes. So I think the first thing we encourage our athletes to do is embrace the experience and the opportunity to do something that's truly unique and special. Understand the culture, learn the language, connect with your teammates. I think that's really important. I also think it's important to understand the expectations culturally of the environment you're going to be in. They want results. I think in the United States right now, there's been a lot of talk about process. I'm sure a lot of your coaches have talked about process and being process oriented. Overseas, it's not like that. They need results fast, and they're going to hold players accountable to getting those results. And oftentimes it becomes very much about blame, becomes very much about results instead of process, you have to be prepared for that. You have to be prepared for that environment. The other thing is that the fans are all of a sudden very, very engaged. So there's external expectations that might be increased compared to what you may be used to. There's internal expectations because you have this team culture that's very results driven. And then you have your own personal experience about being overseas and away from family, and how are you prepared to deal with those things. The first thing is, how do you deal with results-oriented team culture, where a coach or a team owner is demanding that you get a result immediately? I think first is understanding that that's what's going to happen. You're not alone in that experience. Everybody experiences that. Our guys come home, and almost every year there's some story about a team owner walking into a locker room telling them that if they don't win the next match, they're going to fire everybody. They all share in that experience. It's happening with our best players, and it could happen for you. So I think building in that expectation that that's what I'm going to experience, I'm not alone in that, I think is really important. I think it's also important to understand that while you're getting that type of feedback about demands, at the end of the day, you control your response. You control your own mental response to these types of environments and how you're going to maintain your own individual process. Just because somebody else is telling you to get a kill at this moment and this time, you know that you can handle yourself, be mentally tough, handle your own process, play 1 point at a time volleyball, and make sure you're ready to handle the challenges and stresses that come with playing professional volleyball. The other aspect of culture is overseas, the fans. I know in some situations in the United States right now, there's universities that have a large, enthusiastic fan base. I think we see when guys go overseas that it changes for them. It is demanding. It is social media centric. It is judgment from an external perspective from the fans. It is trying to make sure that you're living up to these expectations. The social media component is very difficult. I think it's difficult for everybody and probably is a subject all on its own. But certainly when you're overseas, it's something you're going to need to manage. So you need to, again, understand and prepare yourself ahead of time that this is something that happens. How am I going to handle my own social media? How am I going to handle when somebody criticizes me on social media or in the media because I'm not playing very well? How am I going to handle that? I think you need to put some steps in place and understand that that's a reality, and how am I going to deal with that when it occurs? I think going overseas and playing professional volleyball is a really unique experience. It's really special. Not very many people have an opportunity to do that, and it's something you should strive to do. I think it is hard, and I think the players that are able to make it, they're committed. I think that's one of the advantages we have with not having a pro league in the United States. Because only professional leagues are overseas, the players that make a decision, this is what I want to do, this is what I want to be, I want to be an Olympian. It's a commitment. It's a lifetime commitment. And their whole family is involved, and they have to go overseas and be away from their own extended families for long periods of time. So it's hard. It's hard. I think one of the things that really makes a difference is maintaining connection with those back home. It's not getting isolated. It's integrating with your own teams. It's learning a language if you can. It's embracing the culture of your respective country. There's a lot of opportunities. A lot of people would wish they had the opportunity to live overseas for a long period of time just to experience what it's like to live in a different culture, eat new foods, speak a new language, learn how other people live around the world. It's really beneficial beyond the court. And so I think getting into that mindset that this is what you want to do and this is what you want to embrace, I think is really important. Getting overseas can be a challenge too. How do you do that? I get that question a lot. How do you find an agent? What's the timing? How do you put together a video? It's not that different, honestly, than being in a high school setting trying to get a collegiate scholarship. But now the pool is a little bit smaller, and there's a lot of unknowns because you're dealing with agents you don't know and clubs you don't know and countries you don't know. So I think it's important to communicate with athletes who've been able to do it before. We're certainly resources for that. I think it's important to talk to your collegiate coach who has some experience there and can ask the right questions and guide you to potentially make a good decision about an agent. But for sure, communicate with the athletes that have done it before. They're the most important resource, and they're always great about talking to young players about how they were able to do what they're doing today. Let's talk about volleyball and what it's like when you come to the U.S. national team for the first time and how players prepare themselves to make that transition easier. First, it's about ball control. I think a lot of times you get to this gym and you can see who's prepared to be in this environment simply by how guys are warming up and how they can play over the net pepper. A lot of times, if you're a big middle and you haven't been in a ball control setting for a long time, and we're putting in a drill where we're warming up and everybody's expectation is that they're going to jump and hit and pass and dig and play the whole game, that's a reality here. The players that make the transition can play the whole game. The middles can pass and set. The setters can block. Everybody can play the whole game. So as you're thinking about how you're developing your own game, I think ball control is critical. Furthermore, on the volleyball side, is it so important that everybody knows how to set. I know that sounds a little different, but the importance of a single point at the international level is so critical because every single set is won, and it's usually a deuce set. And it's usually because of a transition opportunity that you can execute on, that you can actually get a swing out of. Middles have to set. Liberos obviously have to set. Everybody has to be able to bump set. We have to be able to play a really high quality ball control game, and setting is a critical skill for you no matter what position you may play. I think it's also important just to acknowledge that this is a physical game. And if you're preparing yourself to make a transition from the collegiate space to the international space, it is a lot about how hard you hit that ball, how high you jump. It's a physical game. So I think it's important to understand velocity on jump serve. How do I develop that? How high am I jumping? How do I develop that and maximize my own potential? And then how do I get into this gym and compete with the most physical athletes in the United States of America? Now, I just talked about being physical. There are liberos, and there are ball control outside hitters, and there are smaller setters. So, and every once in a while we get a middle that's about 6'5". And how do you get into this gym and give yourself an opportunity? Everybody's different. Everybody has strengths and weaknesses. The most important thing is that at the end of the day, you know you gave your very best to maximize your own individual potential. You're not all going to be Matt Anderson, 6'10", with a fluid arm that jumps and touches over 12 feet. It's just not a reality for all of us. So if your goal is to be here in this gym, playing for gold medals, representing Team USA, at the end of the day, your peace of mind is about how you maximize your own potential, how hard you work, how focused you are, and how you do that every single day. I think as we're summarizing what we've talked about today, the word that keeps coming up to me is professional. You have to handle yourself in a very professional way. You have to handle your individual development as a player very professionally. You have to be detail-oriented. You have to keep a journal. You have to have a very intentional plan for how you're going to become a better volleyball player. You have to be professional in terms of how you're preparing yourself mentally to go overseas and handle the stresses and challenges of that. That's being away from home. That's being in a demanding environment that may not be as nice and caring as the one that you're currently in. It's being in a results-oriented environment with a coach that may or may not have your best long-term interest in hand. It's about being away from mom and dad. It's about handling social media. It's about being great in the training room. It's about being great in the weight room and understanding what you need to do for your own individual development and understanding and learning those skills. That's being a professional athlete. You have to handle those at a very, very high level. The expectation is there and the responsibility is yours.